This is the Jedburgh podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning, no matter the challenge. The Jedburgh podcast is founded in the lineage of the special operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike's Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburgh podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike's Subs on the web and on social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. They say winning is everything. If you're not first, you're last. If you're not going to try to win, then why compete at all? Some people, some athletes, some leaders put winning above all else. But what happens when you have no choice but to win? When losing simply is not an option? When winning, no matter the challenge, means doing whatever it takes mentally, physically, and emotionally to get it done? Jason Khalipa earned the title of the world's fittest man when he won the 2008 CrossFit Games. He defended his title and competed at the top level of fitness for almost a decade, placing second, third, and fifth in subsequent games. In 2009, he won the Spirit of the Games award after collapsing mid-competition, then picking himself up out of the dirt and finishing. Jason built his career as an athlete on never quitting and winning at all costs. But in 2016, Jason's daughter Ava was diagnosed with leukemia, giving Jason and his family the toughest challenge they would ever face. For this episode, I traveled to Campbell, California, just outside San Jose, to meet with Jason in his flagship gym, NCFit. Jason shared with me as many reps as possible, his mindset for tackling any challenge. No matter what you're focused on, Jason showed me that we'll succeed if we place our full attention on that task and push ourselves to complete it to the best of our ability, something he applies to both his personal and professional life. Jason and I discussed the 5 parts of the Amrap mentality and how to apply it today in our everyday lives. We talk entrepreneurism, failed great ideas, and differentiation in the fitness industry. Jason explains why he started NCFit and how he grew it into a global fitness business. And we discuss resiliency and adaptability as Ava, Jason, and his family beat leukemia and now focus on giving back. Plus, I challenge the world's fittest man to a burpee wall ball showdown of as many reps as possible. Jason crushed it. And me. Jason, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for your hospitality. We are here in Campbell, California. We're in the NCFit gym. Incredible place. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's my home away from home. So this is, you're at, technically it's kind of our headquarters, but because of COVID, it's kind of shifted things. We used to have staff that sat up here in this office, but now everybody's remote.
So before we started, you told us that we might have a class coming in to the gym in the next little bit. So we're upstairs. So anybody who watches this, I'll have to check out the YouTube version. They'll be able to see a little bit about it, and we'll post a whole bunch of videos and everything of us. But if we start hearing people working out in the background, that's what's going on. And that's going to add to so much more of the environment that we're sitting in this gym. We have so much to talk about. This is one of our episodes that we're doing in partnership with Go Ruck for the Sandlot Jacks fitness event, April 22nd to 24th down in Jacksonville. You're going to be there. We're highlighting and profiling a number of health and fitness's most elite athletes. You sit there. I will tell you that we have been so fortunate on this podcast to have some super fit people. Stephen Nyman, Olympic downhiller, 3-time world champion. We have in skiing. We had Sarah Apgar, I was telling you about, from Fit Fighter. We had Lisa Jaster. She's a 3rd female to graduate U.S. Army Ranger School. But I do have to put the stamp on it right now that you are the number 1 most fit person we have ever had on this podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
The other ones were up there, but they got nothing. But we have to quantify it. We got to quantify a little bit. So 2008, you are named the fittest man in the world. You won the CrossFit Games. You subsequently placed second. You placed third. You placed fifth in other games. You were the Spirit of the Games award winner in 2009. You have gone on to build a global business in NCFit. You authored as many reps as possible. You've raised a family. You've battled leukemia with you and your daughter, Ava. All of these things we're going to get to.
Sure. Yeah, let's talk about it.
In order to kick it off, though, we got to start with your catchphrase. We got to go.
Yeah, we got to go. Got to go. Yeah, that's it.
And I'm going to tell everybody that when we're done with this, we're working out.
Sure.
So I'm going to try to smoke you, but I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know. How long do you have?
We got the rest of the day. The tagline of the podcast is conversations with visionaries, drivers of change, those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. We have focused in our there's 53 episodes that have gone out before this one will release. And we have focused on most of those, the first sections of that phrase, visionaries, drivers of change. It's not that we missed those dedicated to winning no matter the challenge. It's just that it's hard to quantify. That's a subjective phrase. That's open to interpretation. So we underrepresented winning no matter the challenge until I came across you.
Oh boy.
And winning sits at the core of so much of what you do, so much of what you talk about. I read your book on the plane yesterday. We were talking about it earlier. But why is winning hard? And it's because embracing the challenge when things get hard is what separates someone from becoming the fittest man in the world versus the rest of us who are just happy working out and being good at working out. And that is a huge differentiation when it comes to mindset. You said, quote, "It dawned on me that failure simply wasn't an option. If I wanted to stay true to my why, cultivate my core values, build a life with Ashley, your wife, make my parents proud, and prove to myself that I could do it all and more, then there was only one outcome: to win. Winning starts with mentality and mindset. You developed the as many reps as possible mentality. It's about achieving goals big and small through focused dedication and hard work. We're going to break them down.
Sure.
But I want to start with your definition of that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about like the Amrap mentality, it's about being present and focused on whatever you're doing and then essentially reaching your potential there. And I think what was happening for me for a lot of years is I was trying to balance being a husband, a father, a business owner, and a competitive athlete. And what I found myself doing was being 1 foot in, 1 foot out quite often. And, you know, in particular, last night I was on a call actually with Asia. I was on a call with China last night, and we have locations in Asia. And what I would find myself doing more times than not would be to be on the phone on a conference call while concurrently doing like intervals of some type of ability. And I would find myself afterwards asking myself, did I really reach my potential in that conversation, or was I distracted because I was doing my intervals crappy because I wasn't putting my best effort in, and I was doing the call crappy because I wasn't putting my best effort in there. And eventually what would happen is I had to have something changed because I wasn't reaching my potential. I wasn't embracing this idea of AMRAP. So AMRAP, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this idea of as many reps as possible. And really what it means is in fitness space, it's like, hey, I want you to AMRAP for 2 minutes of burpees, let's just say. So you would do as many burpees as you can in 2 minutes. And during that time, you wouldn't be worried about answering your phone. You wouldn't be distracted by anything else. You would just be focused on the task at hand, which is get as many burpees as you can in 2 minutes. So that's really what I started to incorporate in my life, was that mindset, primarily because what I found was that I was spending too much time not reaching my potential by being 1 foot in, 1 foot out in everything I was doing.
And you broke it into 5 parts. So the 5 parts: know your why, focus on what you can control, work hard, shift gears, and reevaluate.
Yeah. And the shifting the gears is probably my favorite. I mean, knowing the why is super important. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, whatever you want to go do, you have to understand the why behind it. Otherwise, when things get really hard, which they will, you'll just end up, stopping, failing, So you got to have a strong why. And then the shifting the gears, I think, is a really cool analogy. If you want to equate this to like a bike. So if you think about like a bike, and I don't know where you're going with the questions to kind of highlight the bike thing.
We take it wherever you want.
Yeah, but the bike is a really great analogy because, you have to be present and focused if you're riding a bike. If you're not present and focused, you're going to tip over.
Yeah.
Then you have to work hard or pedal. Then you have to switch gears depending on the terrain. And then basically every now and then you have to reevaluate. So for me in my life, it was, okay, well, I have my family, my fitness, the business. I need to switch gears throughout the duration of the day and be present and focused in each one of those things. I think that's really important. And then knowing which things build up your day and the why behind each one of them is super critical, because ultimately life is going to throw you a bunch of curveballs and challenges. And if you're doing something just because of money and fame, or if you're doing it for some superficial reason, when things get tough, you won't be successful at it.
I like the shifting gears part of this thing and incorporating that into your mentality, because we think so much that we're good multitaskers. So Rich Diviney, former Navy SEAL, wrote a book called The Attributes. We had him on episode 41. Also a member of Talent Worker, one of our partners. And Rich Diviney says, we all think we're great multitaskers. We actually suck. at multitasking. And what that means is we, like you said, we do many things not well. And what we have to focus on is what he calls task switching, right? Is our ability to concretely put an end to something and start another. You have had to learn this lesson of shifting gears, task switching, I would say in more real terms than almost any one of us. Your daughter was diagnosed, if I'm right, January 20th, 2016 with leukemia. I would say any parent's worst nightmare and most difficult things to have to endure. But that forced you to really evaluate where you were as an athlete, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that experience really forced you to begin to incorporate this model and put a full stop? Because an interesting part of your book is where you talk about having to reach out to your CFO immediately and just saying, I can't run the business. That's on you. I have to do this.
Well, that was actually the reason why I wrote the book, is because when Ava was diagnosed with leukemia, what I recognized is that I was super grateful that because I had embraced this Amrap mentality for years before, we had built a hedge. Like if any family was going to get this, like, not that I wish this on anybody, but we were best positioned for it because we had strong relationships because of the presence and, what we were doing. We had a financial hedge because we had worked really hard, and we had a physical hedge because all the time we spent in the gym. And so the motivation for the book was really to tell people, hey, you never know when life is going to throw you a curveball. And so if you could start working on these things today to build a hedge, so if anything ever does happen, you're in the best position to tackle it. That was the inspiration. So to back up a little bit, the Amrap mentality really started to kick in somewhere in like 2011, 12, 13. I was competing professionally. I was traveling around the world. And at the same time, we had expanded globally as a business, in particular through corporate wellness sites. And my daughter was, a newborn, and my son was born in 2014. So my daughter was 2011, my son was 2014. At that time, I just had my daughter. And, I was walking down the street, and this one really sticks with me, is like, I was walking down the street, my wife was strolling my daughter. I don't even know if that's the right term, but my daughter was in the stroller. Pushing the stroller. Strollering.
Strollering is a new term.
And I remember at the time, like regionals was coming up, which is a qualifying event for the CrossFit Games. The way CrossFit Games events worked, and they've shifted over the years, but you have like an open, which is like a worldwide thing. Then it goes into your regional thing. And then based on how you perform, you go to the games. And then depending on how you perform there, you go represent your country in a nutshell. And so what occurred was I'm sitting there and I'm walking with them, and she asked me a question. And at the time I was thinking about something completely unrelated to that walk. I was thinking about, handstand walking at the regional coming up. And I was thinking about my training that was coming up later in the day. And she asked me a question. And I remember just looking at her and just saying, like, listen, I was not paying attention. I have no idea what you're talking about. And just like the look on her face in that moment was like, hey, I got to be better. Otherwise I'm not going to have this family. I'm not going to have these things. I have to do better about being present and focused. And that's when I really started embodying this idea of Amrap, because my workouts are super efficient because I'm Amrapping them. I'm not stopping in the middle to answer my phone. I'm hitting my workouts at that level of intensity. And so I started asking myself, how can I take that level of focus and intensity and transition to other areas of my life? And so that started years prior to Ava getting diagnosed, which is why I wrote the book, is because I was grateful that because I had worked so hard to build a business and to find a great team, we were able to pivot that off to them while I focused on the at home. And because I had spent so much time with my wife, building a good relationship, when this happened, our relationship actually ended up getting stronger instead of breaking apart. And then finally, I didn't have to worry about my fitness because I'd already built that kind of piggy bank, that hedge, although fitness is a strong outlet and we could talk about that. But I guess the night that she was diagnosed, I didn't know it then, right? But all this preparation of this mentality had helped me for that particular moment.
Can you talk about the mental attitude? So you and I were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
Positive mental attitude is so important. And I really appreciated, number one, as a journalist, I appreciated your openness in the book. Now, as a parent, there were parts of you telling that story where it's hard not to become emotional.
Yeah.
As the reader. And so I really think you did a great job with that and portraying that difficult. But when you think about the attitude, when you're put in this situation, something we talk on a lot of different episodes about, how do you actually show up and present? You and Ashley, when faced at that night, made a conscious decision to approach it with a certain mindset. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So what happened, and I really wish this doesn't happen to anybody, but ultimately, my daughter had been experiencing leg pain, tiredness, general fatigue. And it got to the point where it was like, we had gone and pursued many different doctors and it just, we couldn't get to the bottom of it. So finally, after like months of this, I mean, like to put it in perspective, it was so bad that we were at my sister's wedding and Ava was the flower girl and she couldn't walk down the aisle. That's how much her legs hurt.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself like, oh, it's growing pains or, I mean, even part of me was like, oh, she's just kind of being dramatic and stuff like that. But
give her a glass of milk. She'll
Yeah,
be right.
yeah, nah. And so after a couple of months, I'm like, dude, there's something seriously wrong here. And so she ended up getting some bruising. And that's when we really started to recognize there was an issue. So we finally went into the doctor again. They did blood work. And some would say like, why didn't we do blood work earlier? And I guess with children, and now that we've gone through what we've gone through, they don't want to stick needles and take blood if they don't really think there's a necessity to it. So we go in, we get blood work done. And a couple hours later, the doctor ends up calling. He's like, hey man, you got to go to Stanford ER like right now. So we just left. I mean, we left our dinner on the table. We got up, we just left. And we ended up getting in the hospital. I want to say we got in there like at 10 o'clock. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, they gave us the news that she had leukemia. It was difficult, right? I mean, it was obviously daunting news. And at the time, you don't know much about it, right? You just hear about cancer and leukemia, like, it's not good. I mean, that's for sure.
I mean, your inclination is to start freaking out.
Yeah, your inclination, like, well, this is fine, not good news.
Right.
And, but basically, we're like all crying in there. And it was tough, right? It was just me, Ashley, and my father-in-law actually had ended up being nearby. So we came by and, Ashley just took us out in the hallway. She's like, listen, we're going to crush this thing. The mentality was like, it's us against the disease and we're not going to fall victim. Like we're going to go and smash this thing. So anytime you're around Ava, there's no tears around Ava. There's nothing but positivity. And that really made a big difference, right? Because you'd have people come into the, we ended up spending months in the hospital. And it's interesting the way that your demeanor and action can fuel the energy in the room.
Yeah.
And so when people came in, it's like, hey man, like if you're not in a mindset where you're positive, like don't walk in the room.
Yeah,
like
right. We don't want you here.
We don't want you here.
Yeah.
And we understand like, hey, if you're having a tough day and like my mom or whoever, like if you're not feeling it, just stay outside for a little bit until you feel better. But I felt like that was part of it. And then obviously for me too, exercising played a really big role because I would go to the parking lot and I would do workouts and I would come back and that energy would then, instill in the rest of the room. So definitely that positive self-talk, that positive mindset, which we were talking about before, played a major role in that.
And you have a set of values too that I think are really important to bring into this conversation too, because I think it's so many times. You talked about your why, and you talked about the number one kind of part of this Amrap mentality is this knowing your why, and your why though has to be grounded in something. So if that's, as you call it, the foundation and the fuel of what drives you and motivates you to do everything else, what are you grounded in? For you, it was the values of honesty, self-expression, and a real connection to your community. And as you tell this story about your daughter, what you went through, I feel like those values are manifested so much in what you're talking about. Can you talk a little bit about defining values? Because I was having this conversation the other day. I was starting to laugh a little bit inside because we were saying, people are often struggling with, why am I here? This, like, what's the meaning of life? What am I supposed to do? And you and I were just talking about it on our walk back here from coffee, where I said, my why is journalism. My why is telling people's story. What about those who can't find their why? What about those who struggle and they wake up every day and they don't really understand what their values are? How do they find something that grounds them and drives them forward? What do you tell them?
I mean, I think for me, I'm really dedicated, our business, and we have been for many, many years, to try and spread fitness, to help people live freely and fully outside the gym. And my ultimate goal from like a values perspective is being able to impact as many people as possible through fitness, because that's something I'm not only passionate about, but also have an expertise in. But I think for anybody who's looking to like kind of ground themselves in terms of value, they need to find out like what is important to them in their life. And maybe it's their family, maybe it's their friends, maybe it's the relationships they have. And then finding ways to impact them and raise them up is kind of like a theory that I think about all the time. Because the way it goes, when you have a group of friends, not everybody's gonna be crushing it all the time. And I think as a community, we need to raise each other up. Right. And that's critical to all of our success. But when Ava, it's interesting because when Ava got sick, like the only thing that we were focused on was improving her health. And that was the why, right? The why is, hey, I need to get my daughter better. And then once she's gotten better, now the why is, hey, how do I go and help as many families as possible? Because we were the best suited for this terrible thing. But now we need to go make an impact on more and more people. So for me, it's, improving people's lives through fitness, then allowing people at our company to do what they love for a living, right? I want to provide for people to do the same thing that I love doing. And then ultimately, with that big group of people that we want to impact, how do we then go do good stuff for others? And that's pediatric cancer focused in particular because of our background.
I think we forget about that too sometimes, though, that people are at different points at any day in their life,
sure.
and, in their journey. It's all often we see people and we watch them on social media, and there's always this idea that, oh, their life is so perfect. And there's this, in mathematical terms, there's the slope is up and to the right at a 45-degree angle, and every day is slightly better than the next, but that's not reality. And how do we come together and actually help those who aren't where we are? Because we all are in need at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's really important. I mean, I told my daughter the other day, like, she was saying something about some girls in her class. I'm like, listen.
Oh, you're dealing with that too?
I was like, yeah. I was like,
yeah, we're dealing with it.
I just quoted myself. I'm like, everybody's got crap. That's what I said. I said, everybody's got crap. I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful you are. There's something that you're trying to work on, or there's some type of insecurity that you have. And some people are better at hiding it than other people.
Our daughters are about the same age.
Yeah.
Mine's 12. I think yours is.
She'll be 11 next month.
Okay. Yeah. So it's that age now where they're coming home and they're like, oh, so-and-so did this. And, I was talking to this girl about this other girl. And I immediately put a stop to that stuff. It's like, we live in a small town and everybody is in a different place, and you will not talk about other kids. Like, you just cannot do that. So yeah, it's going to get worse for you.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
me too. Me too. Some days I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Let's talk about fitness.
Sure.
So, a big part of your why, as you mentioned, is the fitness. Why CrossFit? You started working in gyms when you were 15 years old. You worked not only at the front desk, but you also sold memberships to the traditional gym model. And then you jumped into CrossFit.
Yeah. So I was working in a traditional gym, and, essentially at the time, I felt like a little bit we were selling people a bag of goods where we would tell them, hey, you're going to get in the best shape of your life. And we didn't provide them the resources and the tools. And a lot of that was just my immaturity that I think if I can go back in time, I would have tried to tell them, like, hey, just because you sign up for this doesn't mean anything, right? That's just a financial commitment. Yeah. But ultimately, you need to come in here and put in the work. Let me help you put you in the best position for success by having a coach or having a system in place to create a community around it. And so when I found that coach and that system and that success through CrossFit, that's what really drew me in, because I felt like it actually can make an impact on people. Not to say the conventional gym didn't, but I thought CrossFit was doing a better job because they had the coach that created the community, which ultimately created that shared suffering, which people were more drawn to. They felt bad if they didn't show up. Whereas when you go into the traditional gym, it wasn't necessarily the same way. I was introduced to that when I was in 2006. I was a couple of years from graduating from college.
Olympic rower Jevy Stone, we had her on in October. She came on for the Head of the Charles, winningest ever in the women's champion single, and the Head of the Charles, Olympic silver medalist in the Rio Games. She says hard things bond you together more than easy things.
For sure. And so when I found CrossFit, right, it was different. It was hard. It was definitely something I was keen. I was really, and so that's when I graduated from college at the time. I knew I wanted to open a fitness center. I knew I did for years before, but CrossFit provided me the outlet where I was able to do it with a low barrier to entry, right? I leased out a 1,500 square foot crappy space. Yeah. I started with like $5,000. You couldn't do that with the traditional gym model. And so with this model, it allowed me to start it without taking on outside funding and that type of stuff. And to ultimately, be about the why, which is impacting people's lives, right? Like not just taking their money. Like, our business model today, and it has always been really, for me, it's super important that when someone sees a credit card charge from NCFit, I want them to look at that charge and be like, man, I got great value from that, or I'd pay double versus, oh man, I got to go cancel that, or that sucks. Like, It's like if you have a cell phone bill that you hate your carrier, but you're on a locked in contract, and every time you see a charge, you're like, damn it, I don't want that perspective on our business, Yeah,
it's like I'm waiting for this thing to end, so I don't have to look at it anymore.
Yeah, or you go out to a restaurant, you have a mediocre experience, and you look at the bill, you're like, man. Or you can go to the same restaurant, but you have a phenomenal experience. And when you get the bill, you're like, oh, I would have paid double because it was exceptional. That's what we're fighting for here.
The next aspect of the Amrap mentality is focus on what you can control. And this is a big part of my mantra. I have an entire keynote actually on doing what I call controlling the uncontrollables. You said, quote, you invest in what you know and focus on what you can control. You control effort, you control attitude, you control time management, you control fiscal responsibility, you control who you choose to work with and where you choose to sell your product. You control your level of preparation, but most importantly, you control your own actions and reactions, unquote. In special forces, we always said, you cannot control the weather. You cannot control the food. You cannot control how cold and tired you are. You can't control what the enemy does. But what you can control is your level of physical preparation, your level of training, and then your attitude by which you approach these complex challenges. The Jedburghs,
Yeah.
I mean, is a perfect example of this. When you define focus on what you can control, why do you feel that's so important?
The reason why I feel like it's so important is because from my competitive career, either it can make or break somebody. Meaning I've had situations like in 2009 and 2010, actually, where I focused on things that were outside my control. It created so much anxiety, so much energy that by the time I actually had to go out there and perform, I wasn't able to perform. And it's something I've had to learn over the years as an athlete, which then carried over into real life, which I think is a really cool lesson. But, in 2010 in particular, this is a really good example. I came in as probably the favorite at the time. I had a first and a fifth. So I won the CrossFit Games in 2008. I took fifth in 2009. I come in 2010, arguably the favorite, right? Or one of the tops. And the event that I competed in was underneath the lights in a tennis stadium. It was badass. It was awesome. But because it was underneath the lights, they had to wait until like 6, 7 p.m. or even later. So they had the jets fly over. It's just amazing, right? National anthem's playing. I am fired up. But I made some mistakes earlier in the day, right? I drank a Red Bull thinking that I need to stay fired up. I worried about what my competitors' times were. I worried about things that were completely unrelated to my performance. And ultimately, by the time that event came around, I was so mentally and physically exhausted from all of that buildup, all that stuff, that I went out there and just ended up it was a really poor performance. I ended up just falling on my face and I ended up staying there for an hour on the ground. But the long and short of that lesson was I needed to learn how to, focus on what was in my control versus out, primarily because my performance, when I focused on things that were outside my control, suffered because I utilized all that amazing energy on things that ultimately didn't impact my performance in a positive way, So that was the first lesson I learned was in 2010. I started seeing a sports psychologist, which really started helping. And the biggest thing that he had me do was, take 2 circles, put them on a piece of paper, the things that are in your control, put on the left, things that are out of your control, put on the right, and basically choose to focus on the things that are in your control. And once you actually start writing out what's in versus out of your control in a situation that's stressing you out, it really puts things in perspective. Because take, for example, that event, in my control, triple lacing my shoes as an example, right? What's my pre-warm up? All these things. Out of my control is so many other factors, right? But when you actually write it down, it really played a big impact on me on what I wanted to focus on. And then I ended up carrying that into things like Ava's diagnosis.
Emotional strength is a big part of being able to control the uncontrollables. And you call it emotional control in the book. Emotional strength is how we define it because it's one of the 9 characteristics of performance defined by special operations forces. But it's the ability to bring calm from chaos, keep emotions in check, think rationally when stressed physically and emotionally. You referenced emotional strength by saying, quote, winners stay calm and channel that stress into productive energy. Losers complain, fly off the handle, and lose their control. In my experience, this comes down to a fault in focus. I'm going to use this quote, by the way, when I work with athletes, because I think this is really, really fundamentally a great quote.
Yeah. And the way you could develop that. So one of the most beautiful things about shared suffering or exercise or physical activity is that there's micro adversity that's built in. And through moments of micro adversity, what I refer to as micro adversity is I was in the garage this morning with my daughter. We work out every morning together. And, maybe she doesn't want to do 10 reps. She doesn't want to do 10 reps, but she does 10 reps. Or she doesn't want to be on the treadmill as long, but she does it. Those are little micro adversity, little moments in time where there's a struggle and you got to overcome it. And I feel like those carry over really well into real life and in performance in sport. Through these micro adversities, you start building up the mindset of learning how to positive self-talk, learning how to win ultimately because you stay calm and collected instead of allowing these adverse moments impact you so negatively that you end up just crumbling, right? And that takes time as a skill to learn.
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I think people forget that you didn't just become the CrossFit champion. There's that road is long, that road is hard. And I think that all the micro adversity piece that you talk about really plays into that third component of this, which is work hard.
Yeah.
Right? And you bring it up where you said, quote, show up on a consistent basis every day for weeks, months, and years on end. When you show up on time, ready to work, and you work hard. These are non-negotiables. You show up, you're on time, you work, and you work hard, honestly hard. I think that comes back to and highlights this micro adversity, because if you can't force yourself to push through these little things, how do you expect to face challenge when it's big? I work with, as we were talking about earlier, Boston University men's rowing team. One of the things that we talk a lot about is standards. The standard. You come to the boathouse, and if you walk by trash on the floor and you walk by weights and equipment left on the ground, if you don't tackle those small problems, how do you expect to tackle the big problems when you're fatigued mentally and emotionally and physically, and guys aren't performing, you're not performing? Can you then say, well, now I'm going to work hard?
Right.
But you have not trained yourself in the little things to tackle the big things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it too. I mean, I talk about this idea of perceived versus earned confidence. I think it's a really cool analogy. I would just tell myself that I would wear a wristband every year to the CrossFit Games. And I think this relates to business too, is this idea, especially coming out of COVID, this idea of earned. And when you think about earned, it's like when you're in, let's just say you're in special forces, or you're on the rowing team at Boston, you've earned the right to be there. You've earned the right because of all the hard work, the sacrifice, the dedication you've put in. And that's a nice reminder, because nothing was given to you. You had to put that work in every single day. Whereas there's this perceived concept where, like, I could tell myself I can get in the ring with Mike Tyson or Floyd Mayweather, but the likelihood of me being able to knock one of them out is probably slim to none.
You can stand in the ring.
I could stand.
Briefly.
But it's because that's just me pumping myself up before
Right.
I get in. But that's just all perceived bullshit. Mm-hmm. But if you could really back up your performance by earned confidence, right? Like, you've earned it day in and day out. You've been on that boat. You've been doing whatever. You've been putting rounds down range. Then all of a sudden, when you actually go out there to perform, you actually have a really nice earned confidence to fall back on. That was always a reminder of me. Every time I was in the garage, every time I was in the gym, every training session I ever do, and it still relates today, right? Whether I get ready for a jiu-jitsu tournament or a fitness competition, it's earning that right to feel that confidence. And I try and do that every single day is important, in my opinion.
You have a formula for it. And anyone who listens to the podcast regularly knows I like two things. I like lists and formulas.
Perfect.
So,
well, here we go.
So here we go, right? I can see the marketing asset right now. I'm telling everybody right now, there will be a marketing asset that says hard work plus consistency equals results. It's that simple.
There you go. That's the marketing tagline right there.
Yeah. Like, you can't even argue with it, because even you're looking at me like, what do you want me to say?
Yeah. The consistency piece is really the key, right? Especially here at the gym. And I've seen this for a lot of years. I started NCFit in 2008, and here we are 2022. So we've been doing this 14 years. And over the years, I've had thousands of people come through, and hundreds of them will say, hey, I'm ready to make a lifelong commitment. I want to get in the best shape of my life. I need to lose 50 pounds. My doctor says I'm, almost diabetic, whatever. I'm going to come in every single day. I'm going to eat super clean.
This is like the first week of January.
Yeah, always.
Every year.
And then, 2 weeks later, they're gone. And in the beginning, I would be like, all right, let's go. We need you to get rid of sugar. We need you to do this. We need you to do that. Come in every day. I got your back. Be texting them. But what I forgot is that for many, many years, these people had never done that before. Mm-hmm. And I needed to meet them where they're at. Even though they were saying something, we needed to build up that confidence. And so instead, I was like, all right, that's cool. Like, we need you to be consistent. So consistently for the next 2 months, you're going to come in twice a week and you're going to remove soda, or let's just say a month. And then after that, right, we've earned that confidence where you've been able to do it twice a week. Let's bump up to 3 times a week.
Right.
Once we started transitioning towards that, we've seen lifelong changes in people, because it built up this level of consistency was the key, instead of just like fast and then burnout.
Right. Yeah. You don't have to do it all at once. I think people, they start to fear that, It's like, I've never done this before. I've been sitting on the couch for 2 years. I mean, you and I were talking about how I struggle with that. And I was a collegiate Division I athlete and was in the special forces, and I haven't worked out much this winter. And it's like, every time I sit there and I go, I need to work out. You said you put it on a pedestal, you put like working out on a pedestal, and all of a sudden it becomes something to fear.
Yeah, that's right. Especially for people who aren't where they want to be at physically, they just need to like calm down, like not put on a pedestal, just go out for a walk, just start there. And then all of a sudden that walk turns into a jog. And then all of a sudden that jog turns into doing a few squats in your garage. And then before you know it, you're starting to develop habits. And I think that's the key.
Yeah. And there's no hack.
There's no hack. But when it comes to fitness, it's like, I love the analogy. Like if people aren't motivated by like a 6-pack abs or better blood work, like, okay, that's fine. Like most people know the benefits of fitness. It's pretty common practice. If you eat well, real foods, and you exercise, you're probably going to be better off, including after we're seeing what happened with COVID. We've seen who has performed better statistically. But regardless, if that's not where you're at, something you should think about with fitness that maybe you haven't thought about is its ability to be a de-stressor, its ability to callous your mind, like in the words of David Goggins, to overcome micro adversity, its ability to allow you to never allow fitness to inhibit the things you want or need to do in life. For me, and probably for you too, or I'm sure for you, like I never want fitness to inhibit my ability to sit on a couch and get back up again. Or if my kids want to go out and go hike a mountain, for me, like, hey, dad's really tired today, I can't do that. So that's a bigger why, right? Like if you're not motivated by the 6-pack and the blood work, then maybe find something else, like these things I'm talking about. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about fitness because
a little bit. I
mean, yeah.
A lot of this brings up what I mentioned, Rich Davini and the attributes, and he talks about optimal versus peak performance. And the differentiation between optimal versus peak performance being, peak the best you can be, all perfect conditions, the absolute best we can be.
Yeah.
We work with the rowing team and we talk about, okay, we're peaking towards, and Olympic athletes deal with it too. We're peaking towards a competition, right? The finals, the nationals. And so there's a taper, there's a structured training plan. Organizations like the military, it's not really about peak performance. It's about optimal performance. What's the best I can do today based on all of these variety of other factors, how much sleep I've had, other work that I'm doing, other stressors in my life. And do I need to operate at my peak today? Maybe I do based on what I'm facing, but optimal is really what I'm striving for. You mentioned the 2009 games. And when I think about that story, when I listened and read that story, I thought about optimal versus peak performance, because here's a situation where you went out to achieve peak performance, but we're reminded very quickly that today might just be about optimal performance, which is the best that I can do here, regardless of what that result is. And I'm wondering if you can tell that story a bit, because you ended up winning the Spirit of the Games award. Yeah. But it took like almost dying on the road to be able to do that.
Yeah. And that was another example of just like, it was 100% in my own head. That was the year I came off as the previous champ. First event of the 2009 CrossFit Games was a 7K. It was like 5 to 7 miles of just hill run. And this wasn't like your typical, like, oh, we're going to go for a hill run. It was very aggressive. At one point, you're on your hands and your feet climbing up a mountain
because the vertical,
because it was so vertical. I ended up getting poison oak from that, by the way. But anyways,
builds character.
Yeah, right. Builds character. But it was so steep, and where I went wrong was I went into it, to your perspective, to try and peak, right? So when the competition is, and at that point I actually knew what the first event was. Typically you didn't know what all the events were, but I was prepared to peak, meaning you're tempoing a couple of days before, you're trying to evaluate all these different things that are going to put you in the best position to be successful ultimately. And that first event, again, I didn't learn my lesson that year. I learned it the next year, but this year, I'm listening to Eminem and all this different stuff, 50 Cent on the run with headphones in. And I tried to jack myself too much up, but I didn't need that. The competition itself was already going to provide me the stimulus I needed. I was overstimulating myself, over anxious, tried to put myself in a position to win that event when what I should have been doing was just put myself in a position to just get through it. And that ultimately led me to about 3/4 of the way in, almost done actually, the last mile. I ended up just blacking out. So I ran down. And there's a really interesting clip on YouTube. If anybody wants to look it up, Jason Khalipa 2009 CrossFit Games, you'll see me just literally, I'm running down and I just fall backwards. And at that point, my body was just so fatigued and I was mentally so drained that I just could not continue. It's never really happened to me like that before. So I black out, I fall on the floor. I then wake up and they basically tell me like, hey, if you don't finish this event, your games are over. And at that point, I had to dig deep and say, hey, like I didn't come here to lose. I came here to really see what my potential was. I got back up. I finished the last mile. I ended up taking, what's really sad about this event. I'm not bitter or anything.
I only think about it every day.
I only think about it every day. I took 72nd in that event, right? Out of like 73 people. That was a really big lesson for me on overcoming adversity. And you know what else was cool about that was is that catapulted me for the next couple of years of my life, because when my back was up against the wall and I was blacked out, I made the conscious decision to push through and move forward. And that was a really cool moment for me because I had a chance to just give in, right? But I chose not to. And I think that related to the strong why. Like, had I not had a strong why of why I was there in the first place, I probably would have just given up and just called it a day.
Comment about quitting is really important here, because if you push through, you have defining moments, you know, like I feel like in your life, and you've had a couple of them, and we'll talk about some with regard to entrepreneurism here soon. But when you think about competition, you think about ingraining in yourself this no quit attitude. And, you know, I mentioned Lisa Jaster. Lisa Jaster was on episode 16. We profiled her. She came back when we interviewed General McChrystal and joined me on that episode too. But Lisa says you can't let the quit in. And it starts in the mind, right? You know, how am I thinking now about myself? You talked about positive mental attitude and positive self-talk. But I always think about quitting in terms of, I may not achieve what I want to in this exercise, in this competition, right? Whatever it may be. I may not look back and say, the result I'm happy with, right? I might be really upset and it might live with me as it has for you for a long time. And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But if you quit, and I tell athletes and people this all the time, you're always a quitter. You're always a quitter. And you may not quit ever again, but you will always in that moment be known to yourself as having quit. And that to me is something that like I can't live with.
Yeah, I would just not even do it. I think that there's so many levels to this, but I think at a high level for me, if I was not mentally prepared to finish the task at hand, or at least go in there and like give literally everything I possibly had, then I just wouldn't even do it. You know, and I think that's when people ask me today, like, hey, are you going to go back and compete again? I've competed in other events, but I don't have that strong why to be there. So when it gets tough, which it will, of course, I would want to just stop because I don't have that strong internal drive. And so I might as well not even do it and pivot that energy into other things that I am really, you know, excited about.
Said it a few times, but you profile people in certain psychological profiles, right? And there's people like, I think you identify like this. I know I am. That's the evaluation that I've gotten every time I've taken some of these tests. Like you're either in or you're out. You know, it's like if you look at a volume dial, you know, there's a 1 and a 10, and and some people live in between. And, you know, I live at 1 or I live at 10. So I'm either all in or I'm not going to do it at all.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. And it's interesting because I don't find myself to be a super like overly competitive person. Like my wife is actually more competitive than I am. But with most things, it's just once I make the commitment that I'm in, then like I just finished 40 days of just eating meat and fruit. And like that's all in. I mean, that's an interesting experience too. But
I know I wanted to ask you about
40
that.
days is a long time, by the way. So it was 40 days.
What's the reason behind that?
So we wanted to create a challenge for our gyms, for our staff, and we named it the Effort Over Everything Challenge. Mm-hmm. And it was EOE 40. It was 40 days. We had like 500 and something people actually ended up signing up for it. We made them pay $10.40, not because we're trying to get rich off it, just to give some level of buy-in, right? And every day we sent them an email to keep them on track, et cetera. But what it was 40 minutes of movement a day. It was eat according to a nutrition plan of your choice. I think that was important, like, but make it something hard, like reasonable, but hard. And then it was, we called it the Clean Sink Club, which what it meant was just identify something in your life that's the mundane that you don't do and then try and do it. So for example, some people it's keeping their sink clean. So at night they put a bunch of dirty dishes. When they wake up in the morning, they see it. It's like, oh shit, that's the first thing I have to do today.
You know, that's like every night I can't go to bed unless the kitchen's clean.
Well, then you're part of the Clean Sink Club.
I literally cannot.
But some people might be make your bed, or for some people it might be whatever. For me, it was like my bad habit, my mundane thing was that I would leave my clothes on the floor. It happened to me all the time. So the sink wasn't an issue. Take care of that because it's part of my kids' chores and whatnot. So it ended up being for me 40 minutes of movement every single day. Wake up 40 minutes earlier than you normally do. So whatever that might be. Then workout, or then the nutrition, and then the Clean Sink Club for 40 days. And so for me, it was eating meat and some fruit, more animal-based for 40 days, and then all those other things I talked about. I just finished like a week ago.
How do you feel?
Well, I felt great. Now I feel like shit. No, because Well, I was feeling great.
Did you lose weight? Like,
dude,
what's the effect on the body?
Yeah, it was like, so I think it's been like 2 weeks. Yeah. I don't normally do like before and after pictures, but I did in this case. I definitely I put a lot of it back on now because for the last 2 weeks, I just went off the rocker.
I'm eating carbs.
But now I'm gonna now find my medium now. But for me, the reason why I did it was I wanted to reduce inflammation in my joints,
like
and I wanted to see how my gut reacted. And so I was looking up a bunch of different styles of eating, and I liked the carnivore. I was attracted to it. But I didn't like the fact that, like, I don't know, it just seemed like it was too much. I wanted to add a little bit of fruit. And so that's why I tried. And man, my body reacted really well to it. Now I just had to find that blend because I didn't want to be that guy either. So like, I don't mind being that guy for 40 days, but I don't want to be that guy forever where you're at a restaurant and you're ordering with your family and they order dessert and, you're at a birthday party and you're not eating the cake. Like, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
I've been that guy before. I don't want to be that guy.
Do you have the cake with the steak on it?
Yeah. I don't want to be that guy, you have to make a lot of sacrifices, especially when you're competing professionally. There's a lot of times my family and I made a lot of sacrifices, and ultimately after a while, anybody who competes at a high level or even an entrepreneur or whatever, there's definitely this idea that you think that you're the one who's making the sacrifice, but it's everybody that's in. So every year for me, I would talk to my wife and say, hey, are we ready to make the commitment together for these CrossFit games? Because if you're not, then we're not doing it. And ultimately that's what ended up happening.
Let's talk about the next component of the Amrap mentality, reevaluate. And humility is another core soft characteristic of performance. And it's the ability to be introspective, to honestly assess ourselves, our performance, our attitude, our state of being, results in a lot of ways. You said that reevaluation comes down to one simple question. Could I be better? Why is that question so important?
Well, I think the reevaluation, so just to kind of lay framework. So you have to understand why you're doing something in the first place, work really hard at it, and then switch gears throughout the duration of the day. And these switching gears like micro switches. Like, for example, since you came here a couple hours ago, I've only been with you.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And after you guys leave, I'm going to go do something else. And it's going to be completely unrelated to what we're doing right now. That's switching gears. Whereas a reevaluation occurs every now and then. And it's just a deep reflection on, hey, like, are the things that I'm currently doing in my life what I want to continue to be doing? And if not, then I need to do a reevaluation. In my case, a very extreme example of reevaluation was when Ava was diagnosed. That was an example where I had to reevaluate what are my priorities, what are my focuses, and then match that with what I'm doing throughout the duration of the day. And so I think that when people think about what they want to spend their time on, they could look at it from a micro perspective or macro perspective. So for me, on a micro scale, I ask myself every single day, am I doing the best I can as a husband, a father, a business owner, and an athlete? Like, am I doing the best I can today, right? And if the answer is yes, well, then great. But sometimes you might be traveling for work. Sometimes you might be doing whatever. And maybe you're not being the best husband or father you could be because you're out building the business. Well, then for the next week, maybe try and like recalculate. But essentially what I don't want to do is wake up one day 6 months later and be like, dude, I've been a shitty XYZ, right? And I think if you do these micro check-ins, it's a nice way of building a hedge so you don't feel like one day you might have that sense of panic that you haven't done a good job in other areas of your life. I don't know if that's exactly where your question was going.
Yeah.
I just kind of went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
No, I think it's important. I mean, how you have to constantly assess yourself. If you don't, then you go down these roads, right? And and you're right. You don't want to look back in some period of time later and say, wow, I never stopped to check where I'm going.
Yeah, I have a new sauna and a cold plunge coming in this week. I used to have a sauna. I loved it. And then I moved houses and we donated it. And I think those are really great opportunities. Maybe not so much the cold plunge, but the sauna to do a nice, deep, daily reflection. Like, hey, how was today? What can I do better? And then, I like thinking about those type of things because it helps me ultimately try and reach my potential. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm seeking.
I'm not going in the cold plunge.
It's okay. The reason why I'm
I'm
getting one is because I just dislike it so much. So I've done it. So speaking
bad.
of Go Ruck, right? So my Go Ruck experience. So I've done some stuff with CrossFit that's been really hard, right? My Go Ruck experience. We meet in Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz is up here in Northern California, and it's pretty cold. And man, we met at the beach, and 1:00 in the morning, we're in and out of that water, doing burpees in the water, all kinds of stuff. Getting wet and sandy. I'm sure you've done some of this training before. I mean, yeah. preaching to the choir on this one, but man, the one thing that I cannot handle cold very well. I am such a little wimp. I get out of that water and I am shivering like dude, I literally. And so there's all these other people around who at the time, they knew who I was because of my CrossFit background. And I feel like they all felt so sorry for me because I was shivering profusely and I could not stop it. So I figured that because I do not like cold so much, I figured I might as well get a cold plunge and start exposing myself to it, because that could be a way that I could improve my breathing, my mindset, and whatever. So
I'm the opposite. So I went to Ranger School in the winter in 2000, 2005. And it was 2004 into 2005, absolutely freezing. Like it was like the first year that it had snowed in like Georgia in like 5 years. And I'm the opposite. Like it's the heat where I feel like there's no escape. Like if you're in this heat, and I lived in Djibouti for 6 months, like, you know, between Ethiopia and Somalia, where like the land where rocks sweat. You know, you look at it and you're like, why is that rock wet? Like it's because the humidity is so high.
Yeah.
But I feel like I can't escape the heat, and that's where everything starts to close up.
Oh yeah.
You know? Whereas like the cold, I think, okay, well, I can layer up, I can get warm, I can do some sort of exercise, it'll warm my body up. Like that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I haven't spent 6 months in areas that you have, but my body generally reacts better to heat, like being in the sauna, than it does in the cold plunge, which is one of the reasons why I'm going to explore it. Now, I might say like, I might have to sing a different tune a couple months from now.
Yeah, when you're in it.
I'll have to let you know.
Can you push too hard for too long? And I ask this question because we've had some really interesting conversations about performance and mental and physical limits. Chris Free has been on a couple of times. He's been on our short form jumping in. He's been on our long form, where he has the theory of what's called operator syndrome, where first responders, military, people in high performance professionals like you in fitness, where you wake up one day and you're just like, I can't do it anymore. Like I've pushed too far for too long at such a high level, and I'm physically and emotionally and mentally drained. You saw it with like Simone Biles, and Naomi Osaka, right? You know, we're examples of this in recent time. I think the skier, Michaela Schifrin, you know, similar situation. I think, you know, possibly with her. I think about, you know, you talk about injury, right? You know, where's the balance between pushing yourself so much? I mean, you know, CrossFit, I'm a couple of years older than you, but, you know, CrossFit came about when I was, you know, in college, and then, you know, in the early days in the Army. And I think I know I can attribute one back injury to CrossFit and just pushing so hard where it's like you reach that limit. How do you balance that? You know, Jessie Graff, we talked about earlier. Jessie Graff joined us and talked to us about the numerous injuries that she's had in her career. What's the balance? I
mean, I think the simple answer is, like, it's not going to be what people want to hear, is listening to your body matters. Yeah. Like, I think that's like at the highest level, your body will tell you. Like, pain is your body's way of saying that there needs to be like some type of change occurs, right? Something needs a change in this particular area. Maybe you need soft tissue work. Maybe you need whatever, or maybe you're too fatigued. I think that's ultimately, you know, and that's where CrossFit has had kind of a bad rap in different areas. And that's one of the reasons why we pivoted and started the brand NCFit, was more so like taking some of these lessons learned through CrossFit and some of those methodologies, but shifting it a little bit from a programming perspective, to be a little bit more translatable to everyday people coming into our gyms, just based on what we've seen over the years. And I think that people need to, A, listen to their body, and two, I think kind of give themselves like a little, it's okay to not crush it every single day. So like one of the struggles with CrossFit is that typically you would time every single workout. You would try and set a score every single day for your workout. And when you're doing that, that means you're putting out your absolute best effort every single day, because you want to try and put up the best score possible. And that red line mentality can only be done so many times before like that you know, needs to be adjusted.
Right.
So I think that people need to red line maybe once or twice a week. I think that's a good, like, and when I say red line, I mean really get after it, because I think that when you red line, it's where you make the best gains mentally. But if you do that too often, you could beat up your body too much. So I think hitting your workouts with good purpose, good effort is great every single day. but then every now and then really throttle it up. I think that's a good way of training. So twice a week, redlining to develop in between the ears and really push that. Every other day, just kind of put in a strong effort, but not one that leaves you super, super wrecked. Typically for me, I'll wake up. So I go in my garage every morning with my daughter. Typically, she will walk and I will ride the bike for 15 minutes in the morning while watching TV, just to kind of jumpstart the day. And what I like to think about with that is we're putting points on the scoreboard. So like from the moment we wake up, we're already starting with some level of movement, getting that cognitive function, just moving. That's it. And whenever we try and do any more than that, it's not sustainable. Meaning like a walk or a bike is just so basic that it's just a nice way of getting in movement. Then later in the day, I'll do some type of session, whether it's jiu-jitsu or one of our classes here at NCFit. And I'll do that pretty much every day, 7 days a week for many, many years. But that's what I've found is my balance. But if in the morning I try and ramp it up like crazy, and in the afternoon I try and ramp it up like crazy, my body will break down too much. So that's why I've had to listen to my body and find out what works for it.
We've talked a lot about entrepreneurism in different aspects in this conversation. When you decided to open your own gym, can you talk about that shift, right? That process. I mean, you had worked for people, you'd been an athlete, and then you had this defining moment of your interview and your perceived bad suit. In the financial services. Yeah. And I can identify with this because I was a financial advisor while I was in business school. So reading your story, I was like, oh my God, that's like so right. Exactly how it goes.
Dude,
but
100%.
What was it that drove you to say, look, I can do this on my own. I got to go out and do it.
Yeah. I think at the time it was like going back to like earned confidence. Like I'm really grateful for a couple of years before I started the business. I'd meet with the gym owner of our place, twice a week and ride the elliptical with him. And he really helped me understand the business side. And he made me feel more comfortable taking that leap because I knew he had my back. I think that was a major big piece of it. And then also just like, nothing seemed like it was working for me. I would try these interviews, I go to these companies, and it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it was me. I wanted to wear a, t-shirt and gym shorts and like really try and make an impact on people. Looking back on it now, it was a kind of a gutsy move only because at the time, like CrossFit was super new. We were just going through 2008. It wasn't like the economy was like booming. I just graduated from a 4-year university. It was super expensive. No, luckily my mom worked there, but still, it was still super.
No, it's still expensive.
Yeah, it was still expensive, right?
It's like 4 times the cost now, but
yeah, 100%. But I remember like, coming out of there, it's just like, man, there's such a big barrier where when kids graduate from college now or young adults, there's the path. And the path is go find a job that you make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, whatever it is. And if you do anything else but that path, you're looked at as you're abnormal. And at the time, back in 2008, that was even more prevalent than it is today. But I think what it was because of these mentors that I had that made me feel more comfortable. And also my parents, both of my parents were supportive of my decision to not pursue the traditional career. I think that made a big difference. Had my parents not been, I don't know if I would have done it.
Well, they gave you the credit card with $5,000 on it.
Yep.
Which kicked it off.
Yep. Which I've repaid in full many times.
Well, that's how do you differentiate yourself? So this is a super competitive market.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about Sarah Apgar. We had her on a couple episodes ago. Founder of Fit Fighter, was on Shark Tank, got picked up by the founder of Kind Bar and Kind Healthy Snacks. But this is a super competitive space. Everybody jumps in. There's fads. There's the new gimmicks. This everybody's got a new idea on fitness and health. When you look at the long term and you say we want to be a brand that grows, that scales, that provides value, as you talked about, we want to do it not for today but for many years to come. How do you go about building a business in fitness that addresses long-term sustainable health and involvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key is you start with that as your mission, as your focus. It's not money, because money will come. If you find something you're really passionate about and you become the very, very best at it, whatever that may be, chances are you're going to be pretty successful financially for it. I mean, that's like, I was talking to a group of 8th graders the other day, and that was a piece of advice I gave them. Like, look, find something you're really bought in on and become like the world's best at it. Like, where is there anybody that's the world's best that isn't crushing it also financially?
Yeah.
They work hand in hand. Now, if you're mediocre, of course you're going to get mediocre. But I think for us, it's being authentic to what actually works. So for example, in our gyms, when we've tried things that aren't authentic to who we are and what we believe in, we've failed. We've tried, this is not a bash on yoga. It's just not authentic to us. When we've tried yoga or spin or Pilates or anything other than what we do, which is functional fitness, we've failed because we're not subject material experts at it. Mm-hmm. Nor do we believe in it. Like, we believe in this. I do this every single day to help my life. And that's ultimately where the cornerstone of our business is today and where it's going in the future. Being more authentic than less authentic. Anytime we've tried to go anything else, we've failed.
I'm looking for some business opportunities and investment, and I'm just wanting to get your opinion on.
We'll take $10 million for a 1% stake in it.
Okay, yeah, Shark Tank.
Shark Tank,
okay,
yeah.
All right. We'll throw that to Sarah. We got to tell her. But I was actually interested in batter blaster faded lifestyles and some oceanonfrent property in Idaho.
Oh God.
What did you learn from those? You got to explain them now. But what did you learn?
What Fran's bringing up right now is I learned at an early age. I lost a lot of money early on, and so because I started selling gym memberships when I was 18, so I graduated from high school. At the time, I was working the front desk. I then started selling gym memberships, and I actually started making good money. I don't know exactly how much I made when I was in freshman of college, but I was making good money, and I invested into several different companies. One of them was called Batter Blaster, which I honestly thought was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so what it was,
you gotta believe in it. If you don't believe in it,
I believe in it because what it was it was organic waffle making mix in a can. So imagine Cheese Whiz, but organic waffle mix in a can. And the reason why it's so genius is because have you ever made waffles or
selling
pancakes?
Me on it right now.
But when you make the pancakes, the problem is you get left with all this extra batter.
Uh-huh.
So if you just wanted one for yourself,
yeah,
you're like, oh shit. So instead, you got it in a can and you put it out, and boom, you got your one pancake. Done deal. And they had a few different flavors. It was amazing. So I invested $5,000, and I honestly, till this day, I still think that was a good investment. But what I learned the hard way was I didn't know the leadership well. I didn't understand their core values, where they were trying to go. And so it got picked up by Costco, and they had opportunities, if my memory is correct, they had opportunities to exit, but they basically didn't want to exit at whatever multiple it was. Mm-hmm. So they ended up actually going out of business, and I lost my shirt on that because they couldn't keep up with the inventory and demand through Costco, and they just wouldn't take on outside funding. And I think that was a really good lesson learned, that just because I thought the product was great, I didn't know anything about the leadership. I had not done my due diligence, and I lost money because of it. That same thing happened with land that I acquired in Idaho.
Oceanfront property in Idaho.
Oh no, it was Idaho. It wasn't oceanfront. It was like a development, and I put money in, and it ended up I lost my shirt on that. Then I started a clothing company in college with a few friends called Faded Lifestyles. It was a nightlife clothing company, and I learned a lot about partnerships. Lost all our money on that. And, looking at the Faded Lifestyles is a really phenomenal example, is that we tried to start a clothing company when none of us had any expertise in it. We just liked the idea. We thought it was cool. But just because we thought it was cool or we liked the idea doesn't mean we should be doing it. And so I think that was a really valuable lesson that, again, I spent another $5,000 on that. And it's because none of us were uniquely qualified to be successful there.
Right.
When you look at what we're doing now, anything that's outside of our core competency, we probably shouldn't be pursuing it. Mm-hmm. And if we do, it could be a distraction.
Yeah. Well, Richard Branson and Elon Musk have had many, many failures, and look at them.
Well, yeah. They're smashing it. But yeah, I think
gotta get a couple
I was fortunate for those ones. I mean, obviously as entrepreneurship and as my career has developed, obviously there's been a lot of learning experiences, including, I think the biggest thing I've learned over the years is from growing our staff from 1 to 2 to 100, whatever, is along that journey, just learning how to manage people and build an organization. There's a lot to unpack there, because you're not only dealing with the business, you're dealing with people, and people each want to be managed differently. And I think learning that was a big lesson over the years.
Can you define effort over everything?
So for me, this idea, this rallying cry at NCFit is this idea of you're putting in your best effort over everything else. So with my kids, when they go and play football, when they go do anything, I don't care if they win. I don't care if they lose. I actually think it's good for you to do both. But I care if they put in their best effort on whatever they're doing. And that includes, their homework. That includes picking up the trash they see on the floor. Like putting in effort into everything you do, that to me is above everything else. So like, because if you put in effort, all the rest will fall into place, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And then it's the name of the podcast, your podcast. So we got on this podcast, we're going to plug your podcast.
Ooh,
very, very important.
I like that.
Talk about it. We've had a lot of good conversation today about podcasts and the journey of building it. And I think what you're doing is really cool. And I love how some of the concepts that you're putting together.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's, as a business and the podcast is great, but again, the business, we have a variety of different verticals and different things through our fitness company. But I think having like a core values, having a mission statement that's really about helping people and embodying this idea of effort is we never really quantified it well enough until the last couple of years. And so I think that was a learning lesson for us, right? Is that we were so reliant on the CrossFit brand that when we rebranded to NCFit, like in 2016, we never clearly defined like who we were. And so we've tried to do a better job of that over the last 6-7 years.
What's next?
So for us, it's continuing on the mission of just trying to impact as many people. So that's through our digital app. That's through our brick and mortars, which you're at right now. You're about to go see a class. I think it's growing that and then trying to, I think obviously right now is critical time for me and our family. That's it. So try and be the best husband and father I could be, try and grow the business to reach our potential, and try and have our entire team. What would make me feel really good is in the next year, if I could have more of our team come to me and say, hey, and then they're probably not going to say this, but like because of this business, I've been able to go buy a house, or I've been able to go do this. I want to watch our team be able to go thrive. That's a very rewarding thing for me at our company. And I hope that more of them can continue to thrive. We could pay them more. We could support them more. That's important, while concurrently being able to do that for my own family.
As we close out, the Jedburghs in World War II had to do 3 things as core foundational tasks. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, they had to be able to communicate. If they did these 3 things with the utmost precision, then they could actually focus their effort, their energy. You talked about controlling the uncontrollables, which I love because it ties right into this question that we ask every one of our guests. But they could actually focus on the other things, the more challenging things that came their way, like winning the war, winning at all costs. What are the 3 things that you do every day to be successful in your world?
I mean, the number one is fitness. Fitness occurs every single day in my life, and it provides me an outlet to then attack the rest of the day with a positive mindset. So I'd say it's, working out. I think working out by itself is the thing that above all else sets me up for success every single day, because while I'm working out, I'm also hitting multiple other factors, which is de-stressing and then providing myself some time to think about what I want to accomplish for that day. So in the mornings, I work out every day. I set intention for what that day wants to be, right? Like, what am I trying to get accomplished with that day? And then ultimately, I try and every single night, try and have dinner with the family and have great conversation about how their day went. So I'd say those are 3 things: setting my intention for the day, exercising every single day, and then at night, sitting down and talking to the family about how their day went.
Those are good. Those are great.
I'm glad you brought it up. Those are just things that I do. I haven't really thought about them specifically like that, but yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, no, that's a great foundation. The other thing that we bring up, and we mentioned a few of them here, but it's the 9 characteristics of performances defined by special operations forces. This is the driving force: drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, curiosity, team ability, effective intelligence, and emotional strength. High performers have to display all 9 of these. Now, never will you display all 9 of these at any one time. You'll display portions of them depending on the situation that you're in. But in order to be at the top of your game, you have to exhibit them at some point. At the end of these episodes, I pick one usually. And I take that and I think about the conversation that we just had and I apply that to my guest. And I have to do something here that I've only done a handful of times.
Oh, handful.
Okay. It hasn't happened many, but I can't pick one for you. And this is an interesting one because when I put these conversations together, I do my research, and I think about it, and I often can kind of narrow it down, and then through the course of the conversation, I'll settle on one. But rarely, and this is certainly one of these situations where I don't have one, because I think about you, I think about your story, I think about this conversation, I think about where you've come from, what you've done, effort over everything, this drive to constantly be better than you were yesterday, this resiliency that you and your family facing the utmost parents' nightmare that we talked about and that you had to overcome, the adaptability that you've displayed in various portions of your life in competitive athletics, building the business, building your family, the humility that it takes to wake up every day, assess where you are, and make a conscious decision to do something different because what you're doing may or may not be working. The integrity, do what's right. You talked about the customers. You talked about building a business founded on honesty, one of your core values. Curiosity. How do you push the status quo? How do you get better? That lives in everything that you've done. Now you talked about what's next with the development of an app to push it further. What can we do that we're not doing? Where's the opportunity? The team ability. You just talked about your team. How do you come to work at a period of time where your team is going to say, wow, we built this.
Yeah.
I'm providing now for my family because of what we built here. Effective intelligence is the ability to learn from the past, take what you've learned and apply that to your future decisions. And you've built that in everything you've done in every aspect. And emotional strength, which we talked at length about, creating and instilling calm from chaos, learning and not becoming overcome by your emotions. You exhibit all of them.
Oh, well, thanks.
So I don't have one that I can give you, but we say performance is a choice, but the very first step of performance is a choice. You have to choose to perform. You said, quote, you have to be honest about the work you need to do to go where you want to go. You have every opportunity to change your destiny with every choice you make. So here's your choice. Start with your very next decision. I will tell you that you have motivated me.
Oh gosh,
in so many different ways.
You're gonna go work out today?
I am gonna work out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna work out after this.
Yeah.
I am gonna change my attitude, and not like it is on January 1st, right? And quit, but I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna make that commitment to you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make that commitment.
Just commit to twice a week.
I am. And I'm gonna make that commitment to on this podcast publicly because I think it's important. And I think that I've had a lot of these conversations. I think I've told myself that a few times, but I've sat here with you. You've graciously welcomed into your home, into this gym. And that's the commitment that I owe. And I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, it's all good. It's just part of the bigger plan. Like the idea is, how do you become the best, like for your kids, right? Like, dude, you want to be 60, 70, just smashing it, like I want to be as fit as I can for as long as I can. And I'm not trying to do this for the next day, month, year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I want to be that guy, guy when you're on the playground, you're that old ass grandpa that can still do a pull up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Well, you got to do it. You can't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's time to take action. So right now, Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We got to go.
Gotta go.
No, it's time. Thanks, brother. American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.